Okay, let's unpack this. There's something inherently mysterious and, well, exciting about time capsules, isn't there?
Hmm.
You hear about one being discovered, maybe hidden in a building cornerstone or buried in the ground somewhere, and there's this immediate spark of imagination.
Definitely. Like, who left it? What's inside?
Exactly. Who left it? What did they put inside? It feels like this deliberate message, you know? A hidden container left decades, maybe even centuries ago, specifically intended for someone in the future. Maybe even you listening right now.
It's that feeling of a direct line, isn't it? It's sort of tangible connection across this, like, vastness of time.
Yeah.
It kind of bypasses all the filtered histories and uh, the curated narratives we usually get. It offers this potential glimpse into the actual lives, the thoughts, even the everyday objects of people who lived in a totally different era.
Different challenges, different celebrations, all of it. And that's precisely what this deep dive is all about, time capsules. Those intentional packages we assemble, seal up nice and tight, and send hurtling into the future, just hoping they survive the journey and are eventually found and, understood.
Yeah, and we've been digging through quite a stack of fascinating sources you shared. There are articles detailing some really ambitious projects, almost mind-boggling ones.
Hmm.
And then there's these really practical guides, surprisingly specific advice on how to build one that might actually last.
Which is harder than it sounds, it seems.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Plus, discussions exploring the kinds of things people feel are important enough to include, and even these lists highlighting some of the, well, wonderfully bizarre items that have turned up inside these sealed boxes.
Yeah, some really weird stuff. So our mission today is to pull the most valuable insights from all this material, right?
That's the plan.
Yeah.
We want to explore the fundamental motivations, like why do people even create these things in the first place?
Mm.
We'll marvel at some incredible, sometimes strange examples unearthed from history, or even destined for, like, space.
Wow.
And then understand the surprisingly complex science and, frankly, significant challenges involved in making something that can genuinely survive the test of time.
Right.
And ultimately, kind of think about what these capsules, successful or failed, really tell us about ourselves, our hopes for the future, and the specific moments we choose to try and preserve.
Okay, so let's start right there at the beginning. The fundamental question, the why. Why do people dedicate time, effort, resources to sealing away parts of their present for some unknown future? What's the core purpose driving this?
Well, at its heart, and several of the sources really emphasize this, time capsules are fundamentally about communication.
Okay.
It's a deliberate, physical method of sending a message to future generations. One source described it as taking a very specific snapshot of a moment in time.
Like freezing a moment.
Exactly. Capturing the essence of a particular era, maybe an event, or even just a single day.
It's almost like writing a letter to someone you'll never meet, right? Someone who exists only in a future you can barely imagine, but you desperately want them to know you were here and what your world was like.
Precisely. And that taps into a really deep human desire for, well, legacy and connection.
Mm-hmm.
Creating a time capsule offers this tangible way to reach out across the years. You could be connecting with future versions of ourselves, if we're opening it ourselves later,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe more profoundly, with future descendants.
Oh, like family.
Yeah, the Trust and Will source gives this really poignant example of a grandparent creating one specifically for a grandchild, maybe to be opened on their 18th birthday or 21st, something like that.
That's lovely.
It is. It's a way to share life, legacy, ancestry, personal stories in this very direct physical format. Something, digital files just can't quite replicate in terms of, like, texture and presence.
That grandparent example is incredibly moving. It really underscores that these aren't just like dry historical archives. They can be deeply personal acts of love or connection. Imagine opening a box packed by someone you knew and loved long after they're gone, filled with things that tell you about their life, their hopes, their personality, stuff you might never have known otherwise.
Absolutely. And often these capsules are created to commemorate significant events. Think of cornerstone ceremonies for new buildings, right?
Yeah, you see those plaques.
Or New Year's celebrations, parties, major public events like World's Fairs, as mentioned in the Wikipedia source. They become a way to mark the importance of the present moment, a celebration of this time, and a deliberate act to ensure it's remembered.
Like planting a flag and saying, this moment, this building, this year, this event, it matters. And we want future generations to know what it felt like to be here experiencing it right now.
Yes. And beyond the personal and celebratory, there's also this more maybe academic or societal motivation. Sources like Drishti IAS and Wikipedia point out that time capsules are often intended to aid future archaeologists, anthropologists, or historians. The idea is to provide clues, artifacts, context, things that can help them understand past human civilization.
Trying to leave a helpful record.
They aim to preserve salient features of history, though the big challenge there is deciding which features are truly salient and whether the capsule creators are always the best judges of that.
Right. The intention is to give future researchers a deliberate window into our time. Here's how we lived. Here's what was important to us. Here are the objects we used.
And, on a simpler level, for the creators themselves, there's often just a very real, straightforward, emotional reward.
I think it's just fun.
Yeah, the Trust and Will source notes that the very act of creating one can be fun, a project filled with imagination and planning. It feels like preparing a gift from the past to the future, a mystery waiting patiently in the ground or, inside a wall waiting to be solved.
It's an act of hope, isn't it? And a little bit of playful curiosity about what comes next.
Indeed. And the scope of time capsules really reflects these diverse motivations. They can be deeply personal, filled with family mementos, photos, letters, private thoughts. Or they can aim for a much broader societal role, attempting to encapsulate the knowledge, objects, and spirit of an entire civilization or even humanity itself.
So thinking about all this, the desire for connection, the hope for remembrance, the act of documenting a moment, maybe just the simple fun of it, you listening right now, why might you feel compelled to create a time capsule? What do you think is truly worth preserving from your life right now, or from this specific moment in time we're all living through? What message, whether deeply personal or broadly societal, would you feel is most important to send to the future?
It's a question that definitely makes you pause and reflect, doesn't it? On what you value most and what you hope will endure about your life and your times.
Okay, so that's the why. The motivation, the purpose, the dreams behind it. Now here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Let's dive into the what. The actual cabinet of curiosities that people have put into these capsules and what's been found when they're finally opened.
Yeah, the history of intentional time capsules, where things serving a similar purpose, actually goes back further than a lot of people might realize.
Oh, really?
Yeah, one of the oldest known in the U.S. is the one from 1795. It was placed in the cornerstone of the Massachusetts State House by some historical heavyweights, Samuel Adams and Paul Revere.
Adams and Revere, wow. That gives it immediate historical significance.
Yeah.
What did those founding figures choose to include way back then?
Well, the list first source mentions it contained coins from that era, some pages from a local newspaper,
Very.
giving a snapshot of current events, and a copper medal honoring George Washington.
Classic items.
Pretty standard, yeah. But this capsule actually has its own history of retrieval. It was opened and resealed in 1855 during some renovations. And then again, much more recently, in 2015, the artifacts were briefly displayed to the public then. Surviving not one, but two planned retrievals over centuries is actually quite a feat for a time capsule.
So it wasn't lost, which is already a win, but your sources also mention even older examples from outside the U.S.
Yeah, the Wikipedia source highlights some intriguing earlier instances. There's one from Poland dating all the way back to 1726.
Wow, 1726.
Another from 1761 found inside a weather vane on Faneuil Hall in Boston.
In a weather vane, how random.
Right. And maybe the most unusual one was discovered within a religious statue in Spain from 1777. It contained coins and other artifacts hidden right inside its hollow interior.
Hidden inside a statue. That adds a whole layer of mystery.
Absolutely. It shows the concept of deliberately concealing items for the future wasn't purely a modern invention. But the Century Safe from the 1876 Philadelphia Centennial Exposition is particularly notable because, according to Drishti IAS, it's considered the world's first planned time capsule, specifically designed for this purpose.
Okay, so that's really the formal start of the modern time capsule idea as a defined concept.
Pretty much. It was this large, ornate iron safe intended to be opened 100 years later, which it was in 1976, and then they actually resealed it with additional items from that time.
A capsule within a capsule, almost. What about some early 20th century examples? What do they reveal?
The Detroit Sentry Box is a great one. It was initiated by Mayor William Maybury back in 1900. The whole idea was to collect items and, importantly, personal predictions for the year 2000. It was opened in 2001.
Oh, I love this. Predictions. What did the Detroiters of 1900 think the 21st century would be like? Any wild guesses?
Some really fascinating ones
Oh.
detailed in the list for a source. James Scripps, who was head of the Evening News Association, envisioned Detroit as an American Constantinople. He predicted it would be this massively desirable place to live, a huge seaport and industry hub, a center for entertainment, with a population well over 2 million.
Very optimistic.
Very. Orrin R. Baldwin predicted it would be a manufacturing powerhouse, supporting 2.5 million people. Mayor Mayberry himself wrote about anticipating dramatic advances in faster travel and communication.
That's quite a mix of, well, ambitious hopes and some specific forecasts. Some hits, maybe, some misses, especially considering Detroit's really complex journey over the 20th century.
Oh, definitely.
It really drives home how incredibly challenging it is to predict the future, even just 100 years out, using the lens of your own present.
It certainly does. And sometimes the opening is met with less excitement or even, frankly, disappointment. There was the Atta, Norway capsule from 1912, opened in 2012. According to the Wikipedia source, it contained mostly notebooks and newspapers, which were apparently met with a degree of disappointment.
Huh, maybe they expected ray guns or something.
Perhaps. Maybe future generations hope for more personal insights or, technological curiosities.
Yeah.
It serves as a bit of a cautionary tale about managing expectations, both those of the creators and the future discoverers.
Or maybe it just highlights how different eras value different things. A future historian might find those seemingly mundane notebooks and newspapers incredibly valuable for details about daily life, you know?
That's a very good point. Historical perspective changes constantly. Okay, let's shift gears a bit to some examples with a strong science and technology angle.
Ah, yes. This is where it gets particularly interesting for today's world, especially trying to preserve technology itself, which seems almost impossible sometimes.
Absolutely. And the discovery at the Bellevue Hospital Medical College in New York back in 2011 is quite remarkable. During demolition work, they found a cornerstone laid in 1897.
Okay.
And inside was a vial containing bacterial spores. But these weren't there by accident. They were intentionally left by a bacteriologist named Edward Dunham.
Bacterial spores from 1897. Why on earth would a scientist do that? That sounds, well, potentially dangerous or just very strange.
Well, Dunham's purpose, as the list first source explains it, was basically twofold. First, to see how long bacteria could actually survive in a dormant state, and second, critically, to provide future researchers with a sample of bacteria from the pre-antibiotic era.
Oh, wow. Before the widespread introduction of antibiotics in, what, the 1940s? Before that profoundly changed bacterial populations and resistance patterns all over the world.
Precisely. The potential scientific implications of having a viable sample of bacteria from before that massive evolutionary pressure existed, well, they're staggering. For understanding bacterial change, resistance, evolution, it's a time capsule with a very specific high-stakes scientific research purpose.
That's actually brilliant, innovative, and yeah, okay, maybe still a little unsettling to think about old bacteria waiting patiently in a vial. What about a place that's synonymous with cutting-edge tech, like MIT? They must have some interesting time capsule stories.
Oh, MIT definitely does. Both ambitious successes and some pretty ironic failures. The list for a source mentions their plan for a crowdsourced time capsule that's actually destined for Mars.
For Mars? Seriously?
Yeah, designed to use highly durable quartz storage to hold millions of messages and digital artifacts from Earth. The vision is something waiting there for humanity when we, eventually colonize the Red Planet.
A message from Earth waiting on Mars. That's thinking on a truly cosmic scale.
Very. But they also have this famous, almost comical cautionary tale right there on their own campus. A time capsule was placed in 1959, scheduled to be opened in 1989.
Okay, reasonable time frame.
But by 1989, it was buried deep under an 18-ton particle accelerator.
Oh, no.
Lost and effectively inaccessible because of the very technological progress the institution represents.
Oh, the cruel irony. The cutting-edge science literally buried the historical record of past science. You couldn't make that up.
It's a powerful symbol, isn't it, of how quickly landscapes and priorities can change. And then there's the lighthearted side. Harold Edgerton, the pioneer of strobe photography at MIT.
Yeah, the guy who took the picture of the milk drop coronet.
That's him. He left a joke capsule in 1957 meant to last 1,000 years. Its contents: an empty bottle, a coffee mug, and 91 cents.
1,000 years from now, someone might find that and spend years debating its profound symbolic meaning. Or maybe they'll just understand that someone back then had a sense of humor.
One can only hope they get the joke. The Wikipedia source also mentions a more modern virtual time capsule project happening at MIT as well.
Speaking of tech artifacts, what about Steve Jobs' Lisa mouse? Didn't that end up in a time capsule?
It did, from a 1983 Aspen Design Conference. He donated it for a capsule there, which was supposed to be opened in 2000.
So what happened?
Well, the Watch Mojo source recounts this story. Its location was completely lost due to subsequent construction on the site. It wasn't until 2013 that the team from that TV show Diggers managed to actually locate and excavate it.
Wow, so it took a TV show to find it.
Yeah, it's a perfect illustration of how, even with famous figures involved in planned opening dates, simple things like construction and just losing track of the precise location can completely defeat the whole purpose.
Even tech pioneers struggle with time capsule logistics. Okay, let's get even grander than Mars' truly cosmic time capsules. Some are already out there, right? Or
Yeah,
planned.
absolutely. We've already sent messages beyond our solar system. Think about the Pioneer plaques and the Voyager Golden records.
Right, attached to the spacecraft in the 70s.
Exactly. They're essentially time capsules carrying information about humanity and Earth, intended for potential extraterrestrial life or maybe distant future spacefarers who might encounter them someday.
Messages just cast out into the vastness of space and time, hoping someone, somewhere, someday finds and understands them. It's mind-boggling.
And then there's the Kiyo satellite. Its launch has been repeatedly delayed, but the intention is for it to carry messages written by people from Earth today to descendants 52,000 years in the future.
52,000 years.
Yeah, that's when it's supposed to naturally fall back to Earth.
That is thinking on a scale that's just hard for us to even comprehend.
It's the definition of long-term preservation and communication, isn't it? Now, on a completely different, maybe more sobering scale, there's Earth's black box being built in Tasmania.
Earth's black box. What's that?
It's not a physical box of artifacts like we usually think of. It's this giant hardened structure designed to automatically collect and store vast amounts of climate change data.
What kind of data?
Things like global temperatures, ocean acidification levels, greenhouse gas concentrations, human population figures, energy consumption, even political news and policy changes related to climate.
So it's a time capsule of our planet's health and our response, or lack thereof, to the crisis.
Exactly. The Wikipedia source describes it as being intended for future civilizations, a stark record of how humanity impacted the climate and how we dealt with the crisis or failed to. It's a time capsule focused squarely on human consequence and the environmental record.
That's a really powerful and, yeah, perhaps unsettling thought, leaving a record of our potential failures.
And just recently, in 2024, the Arch Mission Foundation managed to land a lunar library on the moon.
A library on the moon.
Yeah, this is another effort to preserve vast amounts of human knowledge, including the entire English Wikipedia, on these incredibly durable micro-etched discs. It's essentially a digital-era time capsule placed off-world, potentially safeguarding crucial knowledge against terrestrial disasters.
From cosmic libraries on the moon to microbial samples from 1897, the range is just incredible. Let's maybe look at some of the more unexpected or deeply personal discoveries from your sources now.
Yeah, sometimes the most revealing items are found in the most humble containers. The Watch Mojo source mentions a whiskey bottle found inside a wall in Lebanon, New Hampshire, dating from 1944.
Okay, what was inside? A treasure map.
Even better, in a way. Just a note from someone named Samuel Stevens that read, "Whoever finds this bottle may keep it. Sorry there's no liquor in it, but I drank it all up."
That's fantastic. A little touch of humor and individual personality spanning, what, 70 years? A simple, direct message from Sam.
Exactly. Or there's the note found in a lemonade bottle in Southampton, UK, from 1935. It was just a handwritten note remarking on Mussolini threatening war. A simple, personal snapshot of global political tension caught in an ordinary bottle.
Wow. You just never know what little slice of history or personality will be captured in the most unexpected places.
And the video found at the Indianapolis State Hospital from 1958 is quite different in tone. It was sealed in a cornerstone, and yeah, it includes footage of a groundbreaking ceremony,
Yep.
but it also includes some pretty unsettling footage of electroshock therapy being administered.
Oh, wow. That's heavy.
Yeah, and apparently some of the accompanying audio is missing, so its full context is unclear. But it really highlights how time capsules can unintentionally reveal practices that are later viewed very differently or even negatively. It's a stark reminder of how much medical practices, for instance, have changed.
That's a powerful and potentially disturbing glimpse into the past. Okay, what about truly bizarre items? You mentioned weird stuff earlier.
How about a piece of cake?
A piece of cake, like actual cake.
Apparently, yes. Found in a funeral home's time capsule in Niagara Falls, Ontario, sealed in 1948. Alongside the standard items, there was just a piece of cake. The WatchMojo source doesn't explain it at all.
Was it part of the ceremony? Was it someone's leftover lunch they just tossed in? The sheer randomness makes it fascinating and utterly baffling for whoever found it.
Wholly unexplained. Then there's the slightly spooky kids message found in a Montgomery Elementary School capsule in New Mexico, sealed in 1968. Among the typical school items drawings, assignments was a note from a fourth grader that started with the line, "I am dead."
Ah, that's dark. Hopefully, just a child's morbid sense of humor, right? But definitely a startling thing to find decades later. Hi from the past, also, I'm dead.
Right. These often accidental or quirky finds can sometimes be more revealing about everyday life and individual personality than the really carefully curated public capsules. And speaking of accidental, the abandoned Paris apartment of Marthe de Florian.
Oh, I think I've heard about this. Untouched for decades.
Exactly. Left untouched since 1939 and rediscovered only in 2010, it acted as a de facto time capsule. The entire environment of her apartment preserved this incredible snapshot of Belle Epoque life, just filled with her belongings, art, personal items.
An unintentional but incredibly rich time capsule of an entire lifestyle and period, just frozen in time.
And then there are those capsules created out of absolute necessity, bearing witness against immense darkness. Perhaps the most poignant example mentioned in the sources is Marcel Najari's first-hand account of life in Auschwitz.
Oh, wow.
He sealed his account in a thermos and buried it near the gas chambers. This wasn't a project of hope or commemoration in the usual sense. It was a desperate act of preserving testimony, a message from the absolute worst moments in human history, created under unimaginable circumstances.
That example is incredibly powerful and heartbreaking. It wasn't about celebrating the present at all, was it? It was about desperately ensuring the future knew the truth of the past. A message sent against all odds imaginable.
A stark contrast to the celebratory capsules. Finally, the Listverse and Rosetta Project sources highlight environmental and language preservation efforts that function as critical, really practical time capsules for the future.
How so?
Well, the International Environmental Specimen Banks are this coalition preserving vast amounts of environmental and biological data samples of blood, hair, animal tissues, soil, water, collected systematically over time.
Okay, so that's a very different kind of time capsule focused purely on scientific data rather than cultural artifacts.
Yes, the purpose is monitoring. They provide baseline data and ongoing samples to track environmental changes over time, understand the impact of human activity, assess the effectiveness of environmental policies, study long-term chemical impacts. It involves extensive, really rigorous protocols for collection and storage to ensure the samples remain viable and useful for decades, maybe even centuries.
Science leaving a very detailed data trail for future environmentalists and scientists. That makes sense.
And then there's the Rosetta Project, run by the Long Now Foundation. It's named, of course, after the famous Rosetta Stone that unlocked Egyptian hieroglyphs.
Right.
Their goal is to preserve languages and make texts understandable to people far in the future, even if the languages themselves are no longer spoken or widely understood.
Because the prediction is that we're going to lose a huge number of languages in the coming century, right?
Exactly. Some estimates suggest up to 90% of the world's languages could disappear. It's a staggering potential loss of human knowledge and culture. The Rosetta Project has collected, I think, around 100,000 pages of text in 2,500 different languages.
How do they preserve it?
Their Rosetta Disk prototype is fascinating. It uses microscopic etching to fit 14,000 pages onto a single small metal disc. And it's designed to be readable with just a simple optical microscope.
Ah, so it bypasses the problem of future technology obsolescence.
Precisely. By relying on a fundamental scientific tool magnification rather than specific, possibly obsolete digital readers.
That's incredibly clever. Designing for readability with future unknown tech by going back to basics.
Yeah. So reflecting on all these examples, from cosmic messages intended for aliens or future colonists, to a kid's slightly spooky note, to a vial of century-old bacteria, a record of our climate impact, and these massive efforts to save languages, these capsules embody such a vast spectrum of intentions. And they reveal so much, not just about what people chose to preserve, but why they felt it was important.
It's fascinating to see the sheer range of ambition, isn't it? The personal quirks, the scientific foresight, and sometimes just the pure randomness of what people decide is worth battling time and oblivion for.
And if we connect this back to the bigger picture from the sources, creating a time capsule that actually lasts and is genuinely useful or meaningful when found, well, it requires far more than just putting things in a box and sticking it in the ground.
Yeah, that became really clear reading through the practical guides, especially that Minnesota Historical Society source you shared. It's definitely not just a simple DIY project if you want it to last beyond, say, a few years. Location, for instance, is key. But burial, which is the classic image, might actually be one of the riskiest long-term strategies.
Burial is traditional, absolutely.
Mm.
But multiple sources highlighted significant drawbacks. There's a high likelihood of the capsule just being forgotten, lost, due to shifting landscapes or changes in land use.
Right, construction happens.
Exactly. And critically, the contents are extremely susceptible to moisture damage from groundwater infiltration. While one source recommends burying at least 3 feet deep for better temperature stability, water is really the primary enemy for most things you'd put inside.
So the image we have of finding a perfectly preserved wooden chest underground is mostly a fantasy, unless it was buried in, like, the desert.
Pretty much, yeah. For anything intended to last decades or centuries underground, moisture is the major threat you have to counter. Indoor storage, while maybe less romantic than burying treasure.
Definitely less exciting.
Mezi is generally far safer from the elements like moisture extremes or temperature fluctuations, though of course it remains vulnerable to disasters like fire or flood affecting the building itself.
What about trying to keep it outside but above ground, like those geocache-style containers people hide?
Options like geocapsules or hiding sturdy containers in fake rocks or logs above ground can work, and the WikiHow source suggests it adds that element of adventure back in. But you still need to ensure the container itself is incredibly robust. And regardless of whether it's buried indoors or above ground, you absolutely must worry about the site being safe from future development, construction, or just accidental disturbance.
Okay, so location is crucial and tricky. But let's talk about the box itself. The container and how you seal it. This seems like the absolute first line of defense against, well, everything.
It is absolutely critical. The container material needs to be highly weatherproof and, importantly, chemically stable, especially for outdoor or long-term use. Sources recommend materials like aluminum, stainless steel, or certain stable plastics like pure polyethylene, polypropylene, or polyester.
And you mentioned a big warning flag from the Minnesota Historical Society source. Something to definitely not use.
Huge one. Absolutely avoid PVC piping.
Really? Seems like it would be durable.
You'd think so, but it's chemically unstable over the long term. It degrades and emits gases, off-gassing, that can quickly damage the very contents you're trying to preserve. It might seem like a cheap, durable, readily available option, but it's actually one of the worst choices for long-term preservation.
Good to know. So stick to stable metals or plastics. What about sealing the container shut? Just snap a lid on.
Definitely not. For durable, long-term sealing, a high-quality 2-part epoxy is recommended for securing lids or end caps. You want to avoid methods like welding or soldering.
Why is that?
Well, the heat generated during the sealing process, or potentially during a future opening process if someone needs to cut it open, could damage the capsule or its contents. And if you are going to bury it, despite the risks, sealing the main capsule container itself inside a thick, like 6 mil minimum, polyethylene bag provides a vital extra layer of water protection. Double bagging, essentially.
Okay, container secure, location considered. But what about the stuff inside? Protecting the actual contents from each other and from residual environmental factors inside the sealed box seems like another whole level of complexity.
It absolutely is. And the sources get really specific here. They highlight that you can't just toss everything together like a junk drawer. Items shouldn't touch directly because that can cause problems like color transfer over time or acid migrating from, say, a newspaper clipping to a photograph.
Right, so you need specific protective materials for different types of items.
Exactly. Give me some examples of that specific guidance.
Okay. For organic materials and paper-based items, the Minnesota Historical Society recommends using 100% polyethylene bags or polyester film enclosures, like Mylar. For flat items like posters or maps, you should use buffered, acid-free, lignin-free interleaving tissue placed between them to prevent sticking and acid transfer. What about photographs? They always seem particularly vulnerable to decay, yellowing, that sort of thing.
They are very vulnerable, and the sources stress this. For black and white photos, and also for protein-based materials like leather, you need unbuffered, acid-free, lignin-free papers.
Unbuffered? Why unbuffered? I thought buffered was better.
It usually is for paper documents. This is a really interesting kind of counterintuitive detail that shows the complexity. Most archival paper is buffered with an alkaline substance, right, to neutralize acids that develop over time. That's great for most documents. But that same alkaline buffer can actually damage certain types of photographic emulsions over decades. So you have to choose the right type of acid-free paper based on the specific item you're preserving. And for photos, Use archival envelopes, keep the image away from the seam, and definitely avoid lamination or dry mounting them before putting them in.
That level of detail is incredible. You basically have to understand the chemistry of decay for all these different materials. What about textiles or metals?
For textiles, like clothing, wrap them in polyester film and maybe tie them gently with cotton tape. Sources advise avoiding wool, silk, and nylon inside a sealed capsule if possible, as they can give off harmful gases as they degrade over long periods, and add crumpled acid-free paper inside folds of clothing to prevent sharp creases from setting in permanently. For coins and other metal items prone to tarnishing, use special tarnish-reducing enclosures. There are products like corrosion intercept bags that are designed to absorb or neutralize the atmospheric gases that cause metal to corrode or tarnish. But avoid those commercially available tarnish-inhibiting papers or cloths you might use in a silver drawer, as they often contain volatile chemicals that could harm other items in the capsule.
It sounds like almost every single item needs its own carefully chosen little protective environment within the main container. It's like Russian dolls of preservation.
Pretty much, yeah. Or at least things need to be categorized and protected correctly based on their material. For something like newsprint, which is notoriously acidic and degrades quickly.
Right, yellows instantly.
Exactly. It's best to photocopy the article onto high-quality, stable archival paper and then enclose that copy in polyester film, rather than including the original brittle newsprint directly.
And the huge challenge of today's world, computers, electronics, digital media, how do you even begin to preserve that?
This is where the sources really highlight the massive problem of rapid obsolescence. You should place electronics in appropriate protective enclosures, like those corrosion intercept bags or static intercept bags. Those are designed to prevent both corrosion and damaging static discharge. Oxygen absorbers, little packets sometimes found under brand names like Ageless or RP, can also help by removing oxygen from the air inside the package, preventing oxidation and decay of electronic components or other sensitive items.
Okay, so you protect the physical thing. But even if the USB drive or the CD-ROM physically survives for 50 years, will anything in the future actually be able to read it?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's a major challenge for any digital time capsule. One Reddit user's suggestions in the sources really underscore this problem. They question the reliability of even USB drives for more than maybe 10, 15 years.
Only 10, 15 years, that's nothing in time capsule terms.
Right, so they propose ideas like copying data onto optical discs, like burnt CDs or DVDs, though even those degrade over time, or maybe including a spinning rust hard drive, a traditional magnetic hard drive, and actually including the necessary interface, like a set it to USB adapter, just hoping future tech might still support something basic like USB.
So you might need to include not just the data, but potentially the vintage hardware or adapters to read it. That seems complicated.
It is. Or at least the interfaces to make it potentially compatible with something that might exist later. Keeping a personal copy of all the digital contents in a secure, accessible format, one that you actively migrate and update over time, is also crucial. That way, someone still has the data, even if the capsule's digital contents completely fail or become unreadable. Researchers are actively working on long-term digital preservation methods, but it's far from a solved problem.
Besides the individual air protection, what about controlling the overall environment inside the sealed capsule itself, like the air quality?
Yeah, you need to control the relative humidity. Sources recommend conditioning the interior to around 20–25% relative humidity before sealing it. For moisture-sensitive items like metal or electronics, using a desiccant like silica gel is important to absorb any lingering moisture. However, paper actually needs a minimal amount of moisture to prevent it from becoming excessively brittle and fragile over time. So it's a careful balancing act, depending on what your primary contents are.
Okay, so based on all this, what are the absolute never ever include items according to these sources, things that will just wreck everything?
Definitely avoid any pressure-sensitive tapes or adhesives like Scotch tape or sticky labels. They degrade badly and leave awful residue. Avoid packing materials like polyurethane foam, styrofoam peanuts, or those starch-based packing peanuts. They can break down chemically and damage contents. Food is a huge no-no, unless it's been professionally freeze-dried and sealed in impermeable archival packaging. Otherwise, it will rot, potentially build up gas and explode, or at least stain everything around it.
Yikes, exploding food.
Yeah. And obviously, no loaded ammunition, explosives, or harmful chemicals. That should be common sense, but worth stating. Even lubricants from unloaded weapons can potentially leak and stain other items over time.
Okay, so putting together a successful, long-lasting time capsule, involves a surprising amount of material science, chemistry, and environmental control. It's way more than just finding a cool box. But all that preservation effort is completely pointless if no one can find the capsule, or if they find it but don't know when they're supposed to open it. Ensuring retrieval seems like the final, absolutely crucial hurdle.
It is, and arguably, it's the most common point of failure for time capsules throughout history. Marking the container itself clearly with the creation date and the intended opening date is step one. You need to use durable marking methods like engraving or high-quality weather-grade paint, as the WikiHow source suggests. But the critical part, the part people often neglect, is documenting and preserving the location and opening date information separately and very securely.
And making sure that information survives beyond the creator's lifetime, right? Because often these are intended for generations later.
Exactly. You absolutely cannot rely on just one piece of paper stuffed in a drawer somewhere. You need redundancy. Record the location ideally with precise GPS coordinates and descriptions relative to fixed landmarks and the opening date in multiple places. On paper, stored securely, maybe digitally in cloud storage, though consider long-term access to that, in important documents like your will. And most importantly, leave clear instructions and the location information with several trusted people, family members, friends, maybe a lawyer or a historical society people who will understand the importance and commit to passing that information down through generations if necessary.
Maybe set digital reminders too, like calendar alerts way in the future.
Yeah, set reminders on calendars, maybe future dated emails if services allow. Take photographs of the placement site from different angles, noting landmarks that might still exist. Placing some kind of physical marker on the site, even something discreet like a specially painted rock or a small, durable plaque, can help future finders, provided the marker itself won't be easily removed or destroyed.
And I saw mention in the sources about registering time capsules. Is there like a central database somewhere?
Yes, or at least there was a major effort. The International Time Capsule Society, ITCS, is mentioned in several sources. The ITCS's own source describes its purpose as maintaining a global database, studying time capsule technology, history, motivation, educating the public, and keeping this directory of registered capsules.
Okay, so there's a place to register it. That seems helpful.
It does. But this raises an important question, actually, about the reliability of tracking these things over the very long haul, even with dedicated efforts. The sources you provided actually conflict on the current status of the ITCS.
Oh, how so?
Well, the ITCS source itself describes the organization as active and currently working on digitizing its historical records, which suggests ongoing operations. But the Drishy IAS source, another one we looked at, states that the ITCS is actually defunct, although it still uses the Society's past work and estimates to talk about the number of time capsules worldwide.
Wait, so one source says it's active, another says it's defunct. That's confusing.
It is. And acknowledging that discrepancy is really important because it perfectly highlights the very challenge time capsules themselves face. Even an organization specifically dedicated to tracking them seems to struggle with continuity and clear record-keeping over time. If the central registry itself is subject to being described as defunct or having its status unclear across different reliable sources, well, it underscores how easily capsule information can be lost, not just through physical decay or forgetting the spot, but through the simple loss of organizational memory or institutional knowledge over decades.
That's a really powerful point. The effort to track the capsules is almost as challenging as the effort to build them to last in the first place.
Wow. It's this constant battle against both physical entropy and human forgetfulness, or institutional change.
Thinking about all these complex rules, the specific materials, the humidity controls, the nightmare of digital media, and then this final hurdle of making sure someone in the future even knows where and when to look. It really makes you appreciate just how much thought and effort goes into a truly successful long-term time capsule. It makes me wonder, what item do you own right now that you think could actually survive this whole rigorous preservation process and still be recognizable and meaningful in, say, 50 or 100 years?
It definitely makes you evaluate your possessions through a totally different lens, doesn't it? Yeah. What has inherent durability versus what has enduring meaning. Often not the same things.
Okay, so now that we've battled time and decay and hopefully figured out how to make something last, let's shift to the really fun, creative, and maybe the most revealing part, the what to include. Crafting your actual message to the future. What goes inside the box?
Yeah, this is where your imagination is really the limit. But the core of it, as the sources suggest, comes back to your intention and your audience. As the Trust and Will source puts it, the contents are limited only by your imagination and intention. Are you creating a deeply personal capsule just for your family? Or are you trying to capture the essence of an entire era for unknown future historians? That purpose is key and should really guide your choices.
And as we spent a lot of time discussing, durability is crucial, but so is future relevance, right? Will the stories, memories, or objects actually mean something or even be understandable to someone decades or centuries from now?
Exactly. And the sources provide a wealth of ideas, often categorized for different types of capsules or recipients, which is helpful. For just a general or mixed capsule, common suggestions from Trust and Will and WikiHow include things like newspaper clippings highlighting significant events of the day.
Properly copied onto archival paper, of course.
Of course, personal photos or postcards, maybe handwritten letters or diary entries offering personal perspectives, current coins or currency to show economic value at the time, music or movie recordings. Though, again, beware of media obsolescence.
Yeah, maybe include the lyric sheet too.
Good idea. Popular books or magazines, posters or tickets from events, maybe technology or gadgets, with that huge caveat on longevity and readability, popular toys or memorabilia, and importantly, a document titled something like About Us or About Me that provides context for who created the capsule and why they included these specific items.
Adding a basic history book or maybe even an encyclopedia from today, as one Reddit user suggested, seems like a pretty practical way to provide a baseline of general knowledge and context for the future finders, too.
That makes a lot of sense, providing future historians with the historical understanding of our time, as interpreted by us. Now, for a baby's time capsule, the ideas get much more sentimental and personal, obviously. Things like a newspaper from the exact day they were born, maybe their favorite baby book, a handwritten letter from parents or relatives filled with hopes and dreams for them, their little hospital bracelet, maybe a list of their firsts, first word, first step, a popular song or album from the year of their birth, maybe a tiny baby outfit they wore, a photo of their first home, or even short video messages from family members recorded on something you hope lasts.
Those would be incredibly powerful and emotional to open as an adult, wouldn't they? A direct connection to a time you absolutely can't remember. Okay, what about for kids creating one? Capturing their world seems really important.
Yes, the ideas here really focus on their daily life and interests right now. Their favorite toy at the moment, school yearbooks, photos, their artwork, maybe a mix of popular songs or a playlist they love, perhaps a description or screenshots of a device or app that defines their generation, since the device itself probably won't work later.
Right, like describing TikTok or something.
Exactly. Ticket stubs from movies or concerts, diary entries or letters, sharing their current thoughts and dreams, sports memorabilia if they're into that, screenshots of viral memes or internet trends that define that particular cultural moment.
Oh, memes. That's a good one.
Yeah. A simple hand-drawn map of their neighborhood or their route to school. And a really nice idea is a time capsule questionnaire they fill out, listing their current preferences, aspirations, best friends, favorite foods, things like that.
That questionnaire idea is brilliant. It captures their actual voice and perspective directly right now.
Yeah.
Okay, for couples creating a capsule together, maybe for an anniversary.
Yeah, it can be a very romantic activity. Suggestions include copies of wedding vows or the ceremony program, favorite photos from the wedding, anniversaries, special trips, maybe a bottle of wine from the year they met, though you'd need to check preservation advice for wine. Handwritten love letters or notes they've exchanged, a playlist of songs meaningful to their relationship, maybe a menu from their favorite date spot, souvenirs from trips they've taken together, items related to shared hobbies, or even a small item of clothing from each partner that represents them somehow.
Little tangible pieces of their shared journey. How about for high school seniors? That's such a classic time capsule moment marking that big life transition.
Absolutely. That's a perfect time for reflection. A signed senior yearbook is almost a must-have. Pop culture or fashion items that are super popular right then, a heartfelt letter written to their future self detailing their current dreams, fears, hopes.
That letter to self is powerful.
Yeah. A list of popular songs, movies, or books they love, mementos from clubs or sports teams they were part of, items from their graduation like the tassel or program, maybe a flash drive with videos or photos of key events like prom or games, again with a digital longevity caveat.
Right, maybe print some key photos too.
Good backup. Ticket stubs from prom or school plays, maybe a copy of the school newspaper or magazine.
Capturing that unique moment of being right on the cusp of adulthood. And for grandparents, maybe wanting to leave a legacy or share their history with future generations of the family.
The focus there is really on personal history and passing down wisdom. A handwritten letter sharing life lessons, family history anecdotes, personal stories that's incredibly valuable. A recipe card for a well-loved family dish, written in their own hand.
Oh, I love that.
Annotated photos, explaining who's in them, where they were taken, maybe sharing a memory associated with it. Newspaper clippings of major world or local events that were significant during their lifetime. A favorite book or poem with a personal note about why it was meaningful to them. Coins or stamps from their youth or significant years in their life. Music from their generation, on whatever media is deemed most durable or easily described. Maybe a piece of jewelry or a small family heirloom with the story of its origin carefully written out. A piece of traditional clothing, perhaps, or a map marking places they've lived or traveled, maybe with little written memories attached to locations.
Those personal handwritten elements, the stories behind the objects, those seem like they would be the most resistant to becoming just useless junk over time, like the historians worry about.
They offer that direct, unfiltered connection, don't they? Now, what about more short-term personal capsules? Say, for just 5, 10, or 15 years. The intentions might be a bit different there. It's maybe more about reflecting on a recent phase of life or just capturing the zeitgeist.
Right, less about ancient history, more about recent memory. A Reddit thread in the sources had some really practical, everyday suggestions for these shorter periods. Things like a pair of old earbuds, maybe an old key that no longer opens anything specific but represents a past place you lived or worked, or a takeout menu from a favorite local restaurant that might not be there in 10 years.
Yeah, snapshots of daily life.
More topical suggestions included things like a farmer's almanac for the year, a list of the Billboard Top 100 songs, current market prices like NASDAQ, maybe even crypto prices.
Ooh, crypto prices would be interesting to look back on.
Right. Fast food menus and their pricing to show inflation and popular tastes, eclipse glasses from a recent event, grocery store flyers showing food costs, or just a list of movies currently showing in theaters.
Those shorter time frames definitely allow for including more ephemeral items that capture the very current moment. Things that might become nostalgic or just slightly amusing relatively quickly. You don't have to worry quite as much about centuries of decay, although moisture and pests are definitely still risks even short term.
Which brings us right back to that big challenge of digital and ephemeral items. Including technology or digital media is clearly super tricky due to that rapid obsolescence we talked about earlier.
Absolutely. The Wikipedia source explicitly mentions this as a major hurdle. And as that Reddit user pointed out, even seemingly stable things like USB drives might fail or become unreadable within a surprisingly short 10-15 years. Beyond hoping optical discs survive or that an old hard drive and adapters still work, researchers are actively studying methods for truly long-term digital preservation. But the digital dark age is a real concern for any time capsule relying heavily on current tech formats.
It really highlights that tension, doesn't it, between wanting to capture our increasingly digital world and the stark reality that the formats we use today might be completely inaccessible surprisingly soon.
It does. And one Reddit commenter even made the argument that for short-term capsules, say 10, 15 years, many of the suggested items like popular music lists or gadget descriptions will likely just be easily available on eBay or through digital archives anyway. They question the point unless you include truly unique personal items, suggesting maybe we should think on a much longer timescale, like 150 years, to force ourselves to include things that truly won't be easily replicated or found later.
This raises an important consideration. What truly represents a time period in a way that isn't easily replicated or found later through standard historical archives or online marketplaces? Is it the mass-produced objects? Or is it the unique personal reflections, the handwritten notes, the specific combination of artifacts that tells a particular individual or family's story?
It really forces you to think beyond just things and consider what provides genuine, non-replicable insight into the experience of living in this time,
Yeah.
the texture of life.
That's a great point. Okay, so we've covered the motivations, the why. We've looked at some incredible and weird examples, the what. We've grappled with the immense challenges of preservation, the how, and we've explored the vast possibilities of what to include, the what to include. Now let's try to bring it all together, the so what. What is the true meaning, the ultimate value, and perhaps the surprising, often unintended outcomes of these time capsule endeavors?
Yeah, this raises an important question.
Yeah.
When you consider all the effort, the potential pitfalls we've discussed, and the often stated lofty goals, what is the ultimate value of these endeavors? Do they achieve what they set out to do?
Well, on the optimistic side, as highlighted by sources like Drishti IAS and Trust and Will, the intention is clear and powerful, right? to help future generations know about the past, provide valuable insights into life and times, offer that tangible connection across time, keep memories alive, maybe form a legacy. That's the hope, the dream behind sealing the box.
That's definitely the ideal scenario. However, sources like Wikipedia and Drishti IAS also offer some pretty significant criticisms based on what often happens in reality. Perhaps the most common criticism, especially from historians, is that time capsules frequently contain useless junk.
Useless junk. That sounds harsh.
Well, maybe not completely worthless, but items that are often brand new, pristine, mass-produced, things that tell very little about actual daily life, how objects were really used, or the lived experience of people back then. Historians often state they much prefer finding personal notes, worn photographs showing use, home videos, everyday documents, things that provide a more authentic, less curated glimpse into the past.
So, finding a brand new, still in the box iPhone from 2024 in a capsule might actually be less historically valuable than finding someone's beat up, cracked screen phone with their photos and messages still on it, if readable.
Exactly. The personal, messy, used details often provide far richer historical insight than a perfectly preserved, untouched artifact that could have come straight off a store shelf. Another major criticism is that intentional time capsules, especially official ones, can present a very lopsided view of history.
How so?
They are inherently curated by the creators, aren't they? They reflect their biases, their priorities, maybe their political viewpoints. They can sometimes be politically motivated, intended to glorify specific people, governments, or ideologies.
The Drishti IAS source mentioned that Red Fort capsule in India as an example of this, didn't it?
Yes, that capsule, buried in 1972, became highly controversial. Critics argued it was intentionally designed to glorify a specific political family's role in India's independence movement, essentially presenting a biased, sanitized version of history. It became such a point of contention that it was actually dug out just 5 years later by the subsequent government in 1977.
Wow, dug up because it was controversial.
Yeah, it starkly illustrates that time capsules are not neutral historical records. They are products of their time and their creators, subject to political interpretation, disagreement, and even retaliation. They are absolutely not reliable as the sole historical source for anything. Their information always needs verification against other records.
That example is a really powerful lesson in the political vulnerability and potential for bias in these kinds of projects.
Definitely. Another criticism raised is that by being sealed and scheduled for opening maybe 50 or 100 years in the future, they actually prevent intermediate generations from accessing and learning from the contents. Wikipedia describes them as dormant museums.
Dormant museums, I like that.
Yeah, collections of potential knowledge just locked away, inaccessible to people who might gain valuable insights from them in the decades or the century before the scheduled opening date.
It's like putting historical resources into cold storage for centuries, potentially hindering research or connection for people living, between the sealing and the opening.
And then, of course, despite all the careful planning and preservation science we talked about, the practical preservation issues loom large. The rapid obsolescence of technology, the looming digital dark age where formats become unreadable, the simple physical deterioration of media despite best efforts, and even potential language barriers in the very distant future can render contents unreadable or completely incomprehensible, as highlighted in the Wikipedia source.
So all that effort in preservation could still be totally defeated by time, decay, or simply changing standards and languages down the road.
And statistically, let's be honest, many time capsules simply fail to ever be retrieved. Interest fades over generations, the precise location is forgotten, like that MIT capsule buried under the particle accelerator.
Right.
Or they're simply destroyed by environmental factors like groundwater seeping in, as mentioned in the Minnesota Historical Society source.
So despite the best intentions and sometimes really elaborate efforts, a lot of time capsules are likely just lost forever down there or up there,
Yeah.
wherever they are.
Yes, that seems highly probable. And even when they are found and opened, as we saw with that Otto Norway example, the contents might simply be disappointing compared to the expectations and mystery built up around them over the years.
It really seems like there's this fundamental tension here highlighted by the sources. On one hand, you have the grand, public, often state-sponsored time capsules. These are the ones frequently criticized by historians for being too curated, maybe politically biased, or containing that useless junk.
Right.
But then on the other hand, you have the more personal, family-oriented capsules. These might offer much more authentic insights into daily life and personal experience, the stuff historians crave. But they risk being lost or destroyed much more easily due to lack of formal tracking, resources, or long-term planning.
It really highlights the inherent difficulty and complexity of trying to capture a moment and communicate its essence across vast stretches of time. What message do you send? Who is it really for? How do you ensure it actually arrives and is understood centuries later? It's
Yeah.
harder than it looks.
And the role of organizations like the ITCS, despite that conflicting information on its current status we found in the sources, it really underscores the need for some kind of collective effort just to track these endeavors, let alone preserve them. The fact that one source says it's active and digitizing while another calls it defunct, that really drives home how challenging it is, even for dedicated groups, to maintain records and ensure continuity over the kind of timescales time capsules are meant to bridge.
It's a compelling illustration of how easily institutional knowledge itself can be lost, mirroring the way individual memories of where a capsule is buried just fade away.
It's this constant, quiet battle against entropy, against forgetfulness, and against the changing tides of history and technology.
Ultimately, time capsules are more than just sealed containers of stuff, aren't they? They are deliberate, often very hopeful attempts to bridge the gap between now and the future. They represent us grappling with this immense challenge of preserving not just objects, but meaning, context, and connection, all in the face of inevitable change and decay.
We've really taken a deep dive into the fascinating world of time capsules today, haven't we? Exploring the powerful motivations that drive people to create them, marveling at the incredible and sometimes truly bizarre things they've chosen to include, from ambitious messages destined for the moon down to deeply personal notes and jokes left in old bottles.
Mm-hmm.
We've grappled with the surprisingly complex science and significant challenges involved in trying to make something actually last for decades or centuries, and considered the diverse contents people choose based on their purpose and audience.
And we've discussed the so what these projects really mean in the end. Both the hopeful intentions behind them and the often faced realities of loss, decay, misinterpretation, and the critical perspective of future historians who might find our carefully chosen artifacts less insightful than our forgotten everyday clutter.
So think about what you've learned from exploring these sources with us today, the painstaking care needed for true preservation, the incredibly diverse things people value enough to seal away for the future, and the very real potential for misunderstanding, political controversy, or simply getting lost over the vast expanse of time.
It truly makes the discovery of any time capsule, big or small, seem like a significant event, maybe even a minor miracle, given all the odds stacked against its successful creation, its long-term survival, and its eventual retrieval and understanding.
Okay, so here's a final provocative thought for you to mull over as you go about your day. If you were to create a time capsule right now, intended to be opened 100 years from now, based on everything we've learned today about what actually lasts physically, what historians really value for insight into past lives, and all the challenges of technology and retrieval, what single item would you prioritize, including above all else? And what specific message, specifically through that one carefully chosen item, would you truly hope to send about life today that couldn't be easily replicated by history books or whatever future technology exists?